The 2025 NFL season is coming to an end, and that means the draft is around the corner. Congratulations to the New England Patriots and Seattle Seahawks for making Super Bowl 60, and I am so excited for it. This has been such a fun playoffs, and I have enjoyed every single game. But with all that said, today we're going to be reacting to Daniel Jeremiah's first mock draft of the 2026 draft season. And I will do my own mock drafts. I have been doing my own and not uploading them because I have gotten in my head about them so many times and felt like they're not on par. But today we're going to react to Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft. We're going to take some notes. We're going to have some takeaways, and we're going to see where the league is at in January before the Senior Bowl and as the Shrine Bowl is coming to a close and as we approach full-on draft season. With all that said, this is Son of a Sports. Let's get into the video. And if you don't know, Daniel Jeremiah is one of the best at what he does in this sport, in this industry, which is mock drafts, analyzing prospects, and recapping what teams are looking at when it comes to the draft process. Every mock draft he puts out matters when it comes to getting an idea of what teams are thinking in the draft process. It matters every single time because Daniel Jeremiah is very good at his job, and he's one of the most locked-in reporters when it comes to this industry. So, with all that said, let's get started. At number 1, Fernando Mendoza. I think that's pretty clear. I think we've been mocking Fernando Mendoza to the number 1 quarterback needed team throughout the entire process. It makes total sense. Heisman winner, national championship winner. Even if he's just a winner, or he's not just a winner, actually. He's so much more than that. He's been incredible. He was really good at Cal, and I really, really liked what I saw from Fernando Mendoza this season. I'm not going to go through every player, but it's clear Mendoza number 1. Alvaro Reese at number 2. I think that's been where I've had him since Dante Moore went back to school. I like Reese as the number 1 edge in this draft class and have him as either my number 1 or my number 2 player in this entire draft class because I think he is extremely, extremely versatile, but not as raw as someone like a Jalen Walker. And I'll talk about that more later on down the road, but that's kind of the comparison I've had for Arvell throughout a lot of this process is he's playing as a linebacker and an edge rusher, and there's not one set spot for him right now, and he is a little bit raw, but I think he has a little bit more development. I think he's a little bit more fine-tuned than a Jalen Walker from last year, who you saw go to 15 to Atlanta. Spencer Fano and Francis Mauigoa going back-to-back tells us that I think tackles are going to always be valued in the draft, but in this draft, we're going to see these two really be at the higher parts of this draft process. I really think that. I think I've been going back and forth about who to take for Arizona, and I know everyone in the entire process has just been taking a right tackle, but I think it also tells us that Tennessee is interested in a tackle. Tennessee is probably considering that, and that's important to note for later on down the line. The next pick is also extremely interesting. It says the Giants could add a receiver later in the draft, which means Daniel knows that a lot of people have been mocking receiver to the Giants. It's either been receiver or Caleb Downs for almost the entirety of the process. And taking a corner like Mansour Delane at 5 is a major statement considering where Delane has been picked and the fact that the Giants mocks typically, or most major mocks, have not mentioned Delane to the Giants. It is a statement and something that we're going to probably see as a trend going forward. David Bailey to the Browns is another surprising one and one that I think is going to become a trend going forward. I've thought about taking a edge rusher to the Browns, but again, I think Cleveland's offense is kind of really, really, really needy at both receiver and tackle. And I know that both top tackles are off the board. They have another first-round pick, but again, it's an interesting pick. Sonny Styles at 7. I know that he has been rising, and it's an interesting statement to take him at 7 and not take a guy like his teammate and Caleb Downs, and probably says something about what the Commanders are thinking about, and also what the league is feeling like when it comes to Sonny Styles. Jeremiah Love at 8, popular mock to the Saints. It's either been the Saints or the Chiefs for most mocks with Jeremiah Love. Ruben Bain falling to 9. So this is interesting for multiple reasons because Kansas City has been one of those teams where if Bain was there, a lot of people have been like, well, Steve Spagnuolo, he is not the type of edge rusher they would take for him. Spags likes taller guys that aren't the best pass rushers, but can play on the edges and be a decent run defender, but can get some pressures, maybe not get all the sacks in the world. And think of, obviously George Karlaftis or Ashton Gillette from last year. I think it's interesting to see Bane not only fall to 9 because he is, for most people, a top 3 to 5 prospect, but also the fact that Kansas City is the team mocked for him. And it specifically mentions Andy Reid having Trent Cole and Brandon Graham in Philadelphia, which also is interesting because a lot of people have questioned the fit with Ruben and what Andy does like as an edge rusher as well. Jerron McCoy at 10, another surprising one because the Bengals haven't been mocked corner very often in the recent weeks and months because their defensive line has been mocked a lot. Caleb Downs being mocked to them has been interesting. And McCoy going there tells us a little bit of what they're looking at defense. I know they need help on defense as a whole, but I think it's something to note. Caleb Downs falling to 11. I think this is a big deal because people have been wondering for a while, where does the league feel like Caleb Downs is going to go? Where is the league ranking Caleb Downs? Downs is probably the number 1 secure blue chip prospect in the entire draft. We know this. He's probably the number 1 prospect, if not the number 2 prospect in the entire draft. I think if I was to rank, it'd probably be Caleb Downs, Arvell Reese, and Fernando Mendoza today. And with that, him falling to 11 tells us teams are still not valuing safety, even with guys like Nick Manawari falling to the end of round 2, Kyle Hamilton being as good as he is, and these guys surprising the league. And Brian Branch falling to round 2 just, 3 drafts ago now? 3 years ago now? It's interesting to see this, just to say so. Colton Hood at 12, another major surprise because although I think Hood is a very good player, Hood was a guy that a lot of people weren't mocking before even the end of round 1. Sometimes to just the start of round 2. Hood is a good player. I can't not stress that enough. I loved Hood at Tennessee this year, stepping into that cornerback 1 role, and just being a very good player. And this is my Cowboys. We need corner, but it's interesting to see that Hood is being valued in that number 12 spot. Maybe it's because Dallas looks at need and just drafts way too early in the spot, or maybe it's because Dallas just got a defensive back coach and it's the next best corner on the board. And Love and Delane are off the board. It's interesting. And Downs and Styles are also off the board. That's probably where he went with this. We'll have to see. There's 3 more mock drafts he does before the draft. We'll see. Mekhi Lemon at 13. So there has been an idea recently where receiver has been an option for the Rams, where I saw Big Game Bengal mention that Casey Concepcion could be an option here for the Rams at 13, that he could be a riser. And it also is interesting for the fact that no receiver went until 13. In these mock drafts, sometimes all 3 major receivers in this first round group go before, or the top of the first round group, go before top 10, go in the top 10. And we're seeing here, not a receiver picked until 13. I think it's interesting for the fact that the Rams could look at receiver, and interesting for the fact that a receiver doesn't go till 13. That says a lot about what the league is feeling like about the wide receiver group, and it could be more comparable to like a 2023 where we see them go later on the board than we'd really expect. 14 for the Ravens, Vega Ioane. I think that's an interesting pick because Ioane has been viewed as like, okay, so he's going to go in the first round as a guard. Someone is going to need a guard. This league is viewing guards much more favorably than over the last few years. People realize the interior offensive line matters a lot in this era of defensive tackles just being better and better and better. And I think the Ravens do need one. I mean, Daniel Falala and their other guard, who I cannot remember at this time, were not great in 2025. And Ioane is probably the best guard in this draft class, like best pure guard. Cassius Howell, 15. So Gig'em, first of all, Texas A&M. Second of all, it's so interesting to see his value here because Howell is a confusing prospect for the fact that he doesn't have the best measurables. It's similar to Ruben Bain. The arm length is not perfect, but with Howell, he's shorter as well. That has been a major question mark for a lot of people because no one has really known where teams are really going to look at for him. But it tells us that right now, as of today, at the end of January, teams are viewing him with a first round grade. He is an incredible pass rusher. He gets to the quarterback. And not only did he do that at Texas A&M in 2025, he was a good rotational guy in 2024. And at Bowling Green in 2023, he was one of the best guys in the country at getting to the quarterback. Number 16, Cardinal Tate. Again, a wide receiver falling to this level is very interesting for the fact that Cardinal Tate is getting mocked as high as 4. I understand that we're not, the people that mock, some of the analysts that mock aren't connected to the league. And we're just guessing. But it's interesting to see the differences in where people have valued Tate and where they think he could go compared to where Daniel Jeremiah is picking him right now. And I think this would be a good spot for him for sure and could really set the Jets up for 2025 or 2026 and just have a foundation enough to go into 2027 for a quarterback. And if you hear the Jets coaching stuff, Jesus God, what is going on there? Anyways, rambling aside, I think this is an interesting pick. I think it's a good fit, but also it's just so interesting to see him not go in the top 10, and it tells us something about how teams are feeling. We're getting to that level of seeing first rounders that, that really weren't mocked in the first round. Akeem Mesidor has really risen in the process over the especially last few weeks. He's an older edge rusher. It has scared some people off from mocking him in the first round and has left people wondering where teams would really value a guy that's 24, almost 25 years old as an edge rusher. But it does tell us something here that he's picked at 17. It tells us teams view him more favorably than we have been. And that is very interesting. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. This has been one of the, I think he's not even an underdog prospect anymore because I think he's been everyone's favorite underdog prospect. If you watch Toledo tape, if you watch McNeil-Warren, you're watching a guy that just really, really pops on tape. I think their entire secondary does. They're probably going to have 3 guys drafted from their secondary. But McNeil-Warren, he has been a very good player for Toledo and a guy that since at least October viewed it as probably round 2 and above, maybe the early round 3 area, and then rising up more and more after that. But it's really, really interesting to see him mocked at 18 on Daniel Jeremiah's draft. Jordan Tyson, I think this would be a good fit, but also, again, like with Tate, like with Lemon, a receiver falling to 19, or this receiver falling to 19 is really interesting compared to where teams or people have mocked him. He has not really been outside of the top 10 ever in this mock draft process. I really have not seen that very often, where people are saying Jordan Tyson could fall out of the top 10. Well, but we also know the medical concerns are there with him. But with that aside, he has been an incredible receiver over the last 2 years. And it's kind of surprising to see this. It just is. I think it's really surprising considering that he hasn't been mocked at the time. I can't stress that enough. It's so interesting to see him fall to 19 on the board here. And it tells us that not only is he viewed as a wide receiver 3 right now for some people, which has been kind of the case over the last, I'd say, 2 to 3 weeks, but also he's somewhat not being viewed as a top 15 pick. Also with Jordan Tyson, that's interesting. I think that him not being the number 1 or number 2 wide receiver in this draft is something to note because that has been a recent trend. It's something that I've started doing in my mock drafts. I think I do view him, medical concerns aside, as the number 1 wide receiver in this draft class, but I also realize that these other 2 wide receivers are either right next to him or so little far behind him or so close to him in terms of talent that I think I haven't been, it's not a big gap between them anymore. I also realize that these teams right here aren't necessarily in a major need of wide receiver. I mean, the Ravens have been mocked Mekhi Lemon a lot. I think the Dolphins have also been mocked some stuff, but the Bengals, Cowboys, Rams haven't really been thought to outside of recently to consider wide receiver, but it's interesting. It's just really interesting to see receiver not go until this area. Keldrick Falk falling to 20. I think this is where I've had him closer as a prospect. I don't know if I'd love him as a Cowboys fan. His tape isn't the most inspiring, but what I do realize is this. He is a great athlete with a build that teams are clearly enamored with, and it will probably guarantee him a first-round draft pick. It probably will. There isn't concerns in terms of his physical profile. What is concerning is the production he had in college, especially in his final year at Auburn. He is a very good run defender. That has never been a question, but it's a Shemar Stewart situation where he wasn't getting to the quarterback as often as you'd like. I think he was a better pass rusher than Shemar Stewart was, considering in 2024 he had 9 sacks. But again, it is somewhat concerning that he just really wasn't getting to the quarterback very often in 2025, while also not really having a true set position, with him feeling more like a tweener between defensive tackle and edge rusher than just a pure edge rusher. 21 for the Steelers. I think this has been a popular mock draft pick for, I want to say, like 4 months now, man. Probably less than that. It's been a while that Denzel Boston has just been marked for the Steelers spot. I think since the Steelers got to round 21, I think since like November, Denzel Boston for sure has been a popular pick here. And yeah, I think they need a wide receiver too, and Boston gets that wide receiver 4 role for this draft. I think that's where most people have had him, if not wide receiver 5. And it's easy to just mock him there. I think it also tells us that that's kind of where his value is right now. Lee Hunter, another guy that's rising in this process, someone that hasn't gotten the most attention at Texas Tech. He's a defensive tackle. He does the dirty work, which is something that I think is always going to be undervalued. But he's also playing next to 2 guys that have gotten a lot of sacks. And he's playing in front of a linebacker in Jacob Rodriguez that was very, very popular nationally with all the picks and takeaways he was forcing throughout the year, to the point where he was like the 5th in Heisman voting. And then also the 2 guys I mentioned getting to the quarterback all the time, Romelio Height and David Bailey, who was also mocked, 15 picks before this? Eagles at 23 tells us again that I think corner is going to be one of the positions they value. I think I could see corner, tight end, wide receiver, those 3. But Avion Terrell, I've kind of had him rising to this range, but I definitely could see him falling to this area. And Colton Hood being above Avion Terrell, very interesting, and does tell us something for how teams view him. Caden Proctor, definitely a popular draft pick to the Browns. Dylan Thieneman, I get it. I think he's had a very, very good tape. I think he's been a very fun player to watch at Oregon. And the Bears do need some secondary help. That is definitely going to be some consideration for this offseason. And all 3 of their safeties are free agents. Buffalo, CJ Allen. My favorite mock pick for him is something I'm going to do when I do my official mock draft, my first mock draft. And I understand, because linebacker-wise, they're not very good. They just aren't. I think Milano, Thompson, and their other linebacker, who I can't remember for the life of me right now, have not been very good this year. I really don't think so. I think their linebacking core has been really underwhelming, and CJ Allen would add a lot to their run defense, which has really regressed over the last few years. Yeah. 49ers, Kenyon Sadiq. This was a pick I thought of last week, and I don't want to toot my own horn because he's being mocked here. I think it matches what people are going to be feeling like going into the draft, considering that George Kittle did tear his Achilles, and I hope he gets better as quickly as possible, because I want to see George Kittle just a few more years before he calls it quits, and him tearing his Achilles really does hurt that. But Sadiq has a weird, how would you say this? Weird situation where we can't really pinpoint where he's mocked, and Jeremiah says so himself, could go much higher than 27th overall. There is a world where Sadiq has been mocked in the top 10. There is a world where Sadiq has been mocked to the Bucks at 15, Panthers at 19. It's so weird where we're kind of evaluating him, where we're kind of valuing him, that no one can really pinpoint it right now, because tight ends are so hard to really tell what teams are feeling like. Going into 2023, Michael Mayer and Dalton Kincaid. Mayer felt like the for sure guy in that draft class. Then you see him fall to tight end 3 or 4, and you see Sam Laporta go at the beginning of the second round. You see Kincaid go to the Bills at 26, which people thought he was for sure going to Dallas. And then you saw last year Colston Loveland go at 10 to the Bears, which was something that people were kind of thinking of with Tyler Warren to the Bears at the last minute, but unsure of, while also seeing Warren go to the Colts at 14, I believe, which that was a popular mock because they desperately needed tight end. But this would be a good fit. It's just really hard to tell where Sadiq is going, and I think that's where Jeremiah is right now as well. We can't pinpoint tight end exactly. Monroe Feeling, guy that has really risen in this process. And I think you'd have to move him positions if you want to take him if you're the Texans, because you just got Ursaray at left tackle. But again, I think it reinforces the rising opinion that Freeling could very well be a first rounder. Blake Miller, someone that a lot of people have wondered could rise to the first round. I think this is certainly a possibility, but I think the Rams have had some more confidence in the right tackle situation recently that I haven't really seen a right tackle as mocked as often as you'd think for the Rams. Also, the Rams last night, I think, realized what they really, really need, which is corner, and I think we're going to see that mocked. Actually, we've seen it mostly mocked the entire draft process, but I think it's going to reinforce that a lot more over the next few months. Broncos, this is a very interesting selection. Peter Woods falling to 30. When people mock with Peter Woods, the consensus has been around, I'd say around pick 8, pick 7, all the way to just like pick 17. Let's just say that range. And Woods going to 30 and him mentioning some don't view him as a first round pick. That is a very, very, very interesting line. And considering that Peter Woods at one point was the number 1 prospect in this draft going into the 2025 season. It's like a James Pierce situation. I bet he falls to the end of the first round if this is where teams are valuing him right now. And he'll be very surprised in year 1, even though Woods did regress every single year in college from his true freshman year to his sophomore year. And then he was great even in his sophomore year, but his final year was underwhelming at Clemson. Caleb Lomu at 31. Interesting to see the opinion of a left tackle going to the Patriots again, or them moving him to right tackle. But also, I think Lomu was always feeling like a first rounder, a guy that could go in the first round. Blake Miller going before him, interesting for sure, but I've always liked Lomu and thought he'd be in this range. And then Brandon Seiss at 32. I think that's been a popular opinion, a popular fit for the Seahawks, and probably something that gets reinforced over the next few weeks and months. And they do have free agents in Tariq Woolen and Josh Jobe. Okay, so the takeaways part of this. What are we seeing? I know I shared my thoughts with all those picks, but let's have some clear takeaways. Number 1, tackles are higher than most people thought of, and we have a clear range for where Spencer Fano and Francis Mauigoa are being viewed at in January of the process. In that top 5 to 10 range, which is something that solidifies our opinion that not only one of these tackles is going to be taken, both of them are. I think it's been confusing. I think it's actually been really confusing over the last few weeks where we've been separating the two and saying, okay, one's going to go at 3 to the Cardinals, and then one of them is going to fall to maybe the Lions all the way down at pick 17. That has been a popular and rising opinion recently, and it tells us something, that these tackles are probably both going to go in the top 10. Number 2, Mansour Delane at 5 is a very, very interesting selection and tells us not only is he being more valued than even we thought with him going to around picks 10 to 13, maybe a little bit less than that. I've been taking him all the way down to the Jets recently. It also tells us that the Giants are going to look at corner. That corner is probably going to be the most valued position they have. And the line about receiver going later in the draft tells us that although we're picking receiver, the Giants are looking at a different direction. And receiver could go there, but right now, Giants are looking at something else. Number 3, Caleb Downs going outside of the top 10. I think that's been something I've been doing and feeling a little bit bad about because I know people have been taking him in the top 5 still. And with that, it's interesting that he's being taken there because, again, he has been a very good prospect and a very popular prospect over the last few years since he was a true freshman at Alabama. And a guy like that falling outside of the top 10 is just, it's interesting. It tells us his value right now. Number 4, wide receiver not going till pick 13. That's telling us something about where we're viewing receivers compared to how the league is. The Titans, the Giants, those 2 teams, and the Browns, all 3 have been viewed as popular wide receiver destinations over the last few months because, well, that's just, they need receiver. And Daniel Jeremiah basically just told us, right now, I probably wouldn't bet on that. Right now, that has not been what these teams have been looking at. Right now, these teams have been looking at something different, even with Cleveland looking at edge rusher with all their offensive needs. and they don't even have a coach right now, so we're unsure of what their total mindset is. With all that said, it's interesting. It is interesting. Number 5, Peter Woods going to the end of the first round and the note of him not being viewed as a first rounder for some teams. That is insane. Not because Daniel Jeremiah is insane, but because it's just wildly different from what people have thought about him. People have thought, well, he was so good in 2024 and 2023, he could easily be mocked as a first rounder or easily counted down as a first rounder. That teams are going to ignore the underwhelming tape from 2025, the underwhelming play from him and the rest of Clemson, that he is going to easily still be a top 15 pick. Well, that's not the case anymore. The case is that some don't view him as a first rounder, and that's very surprising. Number 6, Colton Hood being as high as he is. Hood is not a bad player, and he's not one that I was expecting to see in the top 15, though. I even at 12 to the Cowboys, I think Hood, although he's a great player, I was viewing him more at the bottom of the first round all the way to the start of the second round. Not to diss on the player, I don't want to do that. I'm more so saying it's interesting to see the value teams are having on him and the fact that they have him over someone like Avion Terrell at this point and are ranking him closer to his teammate and Jermon McCoy. Number 7, I think interior defensive lineman not being on this draft board for Daniel Jeremiah tells us a lot. Lee Hunter being the number 1 interior defensive lineman being taken in this draft tells us not only do teams value him a lot higher than we have, that also this interior defensive line group is not very much valued by the league right now for the first round. Peter Woods being listed as some don't view him as a first rounder, that is something. Caden McDonald, Caleb Banks, and Christian Miller, all 3 not being taken in the first round. I'm not saying all 3 should have. I'm saying not at least one of the 3 not being taken in the first round is something to note. Because Caden McDonald has been going as high as 20 for some people. Caden McDonald is in a lot of people's top 20 big boards. That is very, very interesting to see him not mocked in the first round. And then my final note is Kenyon Sadiq still not really having a full-on certain area of value right now. He could go as high as in the top 10, or he could go right at the end of the first round, maybe even the beginning of the second round. Tight end value is so hard to gauge. Some popular names that weren't taken in the first round from Daniel Jeremiah's first mock draft: Casey Concepcion, TJ Parker, Caden McDonald, Emmanuel Pregnon, Ty Simpson, Caleb Banks, Christian Miller. This is notable because a lot of these guys have been viewed as maybe even the bottom of the first round or guys that could rise up. Casey Concepcion is someone that has risen up for a lot of people recently. Someone that is a controversial draft prospect, but one that people have either had a great opinion of or one that people think might not work out in the NFL because of some certain stats. Caden McDonald, because of Amari Washington going back to school, a lot of people have had him high in the top 20 range. And then Ty Simpson. It tells us that only one quarterback is being viewed as a certain first round pick right now. And Ty Simpson and maybe even Trinidad Chambliss are not being viewed in that range. Then some notable names that Daniel Jeremiah included in his first round mock that I think need to be mentioned because they're rising. Dylan Thieneman, Lee Hunter, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, and Akeem Mezidir. These are guys that have been rising a lot, or guys that a lot of people have not had a certain, opinion about, because we don't know where teams are valuing some of these guys because of their ages with Mezidir and even Hunter, and then also their positions with Thieneman and McNeil-Warren both being at safety. And the first round in an NFL draft is notable for not really valuing safety very much. And look, it's just January. It is a weird time. We are unsure of so many things. The only thing we know about the NFL draft is we don't know a lot. And there is still so much to be discussed, analyzed, and debated over the next few months as we approach the end of April. And I'm pretty sure the draft is like 3 months away from exactly today, from when I'm recording this. Maybe not. It would be 3 months from a week from today for sure. Well, all that said, I really am excited for this draft process. And although this draft notably doesn't have the blue chips that you'd expect at the top or the biggest group of quarterbacks, it is still a fun draft because the NFL draft is one of the most exciting things in sports. With all that said, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what your opinions are down below. I will do a mock draft very soon. And this is Son of a Sports. I'll catch you next time.